So you want to own a solar farm? The pitch is the simplest one in energy. The fuel is free, it shows up every morning, and nobody can raise the price on you. All of that is true, and all of it is close to irrelevant. The sun has never been the scarce input in this business. What is scarce is a piece of paper from a utility saying you are allowed to plug in, and the number that proves it is the most brutal statistic in American infrastructure. Here is that number. Of all the generating capacity that filed to connect to the American grid between 2000 and 2019, only 13% was actually running by the end of 2024. 77% had been withdrawn, not delayed, withdrawn. Abandoned by the same people who paid for the studies, and for the projects that did make it. The median wait from filing to switching on has more than doubled, from under 2 years for the plants built in the early 2000s to more than 4 years for the ones built between 2018 and 2024. Over the next 6 minutes, I'm going to show you what the building costs, what you're allowed to charge for the power, the two numbers that shrink every year you own it, and the deadline that now decides whether the asset is worth owning at all. Start with the capital. Across 76 utility-scale plants finished in 2023, totaling 7.1 gigawatts, the capacity-weighted average installed cost was $1.43 a watt. That figure has fallen 75% since 2010, roughly 10% a year, and it is the genuine good news in this industry, but apply it. A 100 megawatt farm, an ordinary size for something selling into a wholesale market, costs about $143 million before you have signed a single customer. Then the ground underneath it. Utility-scale solar uses about 7.3 acres for every megawatt, so that 100 megawatt farm needs roughly 730 acres. You can buy the land or you can lease it. And most developers lease because land is the one cost you are allowed to pay slowly. Lease rates typically run $500 to $1,000 an acre a year, with a national average nearer $500 to $700 on terms of 20 to 35 years with an escalator written in. Call it $500,000 a year on 700 acres, rising every year for the entire life of the asset. The escalator never pauses because your output did. Now the revenue, and this is where anyone who has only read the brochure gets surprised. A solar plant does not run at its nameplate. The median plant-level capacity factor is 24%, and across the fleet it ranges from 7% to 35%. At 24%, a 100 megawatt farm produces about 210,000 megawatt hours a year. The contract you sell that into, a power purchase agreement, was pricing at the 25th percentile around $59.77 a megawatt hour in the third quarter of 2025. Multiply it out and you get roughly $12.5 million a year of gross revenue. Against that, the operating costs are genuinely small. Maintenance runs $5 to $8 per kilowatt a year, and property taxes plus the land lease together come to something of similar size. Solar really is cheap to run, but hold two other numbers side by side because this is the whole film in one comparison. The levelized cost of electricity from plants built in 2023 was $46 a megawatt hour before tax credits and $31 after them. The federal credit is worth about a third of the cost of your own product. Without it, the plant price is above the market it is trying to sell into. Which brings us to the two numbers that only move one direction. The first is degradation. Modules lose about 0.5% of their output every year, the accepted median, so by year 25 a panel rated at 100 is delivering about 88. That sounds survivable until you remember what it is running against, which is a contract price fixed years earlier on the assumption of a fuller output. Every year the plant sells slightly less electricity at a price it cannot renegotiate. The second is curtailment, and it is the one nobody models honestly. Curtailment is the grid telling you to stop generating because there is nowhere for the power to go. In California in 2024, the operator curtailed 3.4 million megawatt hours of wind and solar, 29% more than the year before, and solar was 93% of everything curtailed. That came to about 6.3% of the state's in-state solar generation. It peaks in spring, when output is high and demand is low, and you do not get paid for a lot of it. This is revenue that exists in your model and not in your bank account. And now the part that changes the answer entirely. Until last year, the federal credit was a long runway. It is not anymore. Under the law signed in July of 2025, a solar project has to have begun construction by the 4th of July 2026, or else be placed in service by the 31st of December 2027 to claim that credit at all. Since the 2nd of September 2025, the only way to prove you began construction is physical work on the ground. The old option of simply spending 5% of the budget is gone for anything above 1.5 megawatts. Read that against the queue and you can watch the trap close. The median project waits more than 4 years to connect. The construction deadline has already passed. So the asset you would be buying today is not really a field of panels, and it never was. It is a tax position and a signed interconnection agreement, wrapped around some hardware that loses 0.5% a year and gets switched off every spring. The sunlight was always free. It was also the only part of this business that nobody was ever going to charge you for.